I thought I would share 4 practices that have been really helpful for me and some other things I've learned along the way. And these, I believe, are practices that you can bring into your life no matter where you are, what you're doing. You don't need to leave home to practice these. The number one, which has been the foundation of my pilgrimage, is to really don't know. Really, really not know. We talk a lot about not knowing in Zen to the point that it can kind of become an idea in and of itself. Oh yeah, I'm just going to not know. I found there's the idea of not knowing, and then there's the reality of not knowing, which feels really different. And even as I was preparing to leave, I could feel that in my body, this kind of like squishiness and like the tectonic plates were not so contained anymore. At the time, a lot of people would ask me, some of you in this room would ask, so where are you going? What are you going to do? And I found myself really called to answer that. And I'd say something, oh, I think I'm going to do this or that, or I might go here. None of it was true. Anything I told you about what I was going to do, I actually didn't mean any of it. I was lying to myself and others. And I saw myself doing that. I saw the pull to satisfy our cultural need to know, my need to, please others. And I stopped doing that maybe a few weeks before I left. And if somebody asked me what I was doing, where I was going, my only answer was, I have no idea. I don't know. And this really kind of interesting thing would happen. This energy would rise in them and in me, as I think everybody would kind of just feel the excitement of that, mutual excitement of, oh, what's it like to really not know? Once I left, though, this was still pretty alive for me, especially in the first month or so. There were a lot of, the mind doing its thing. What am I doing? What's the point in this? How will this serve anybody? Is this selfish? That was a big one. Who am I to just leave everybody else to the work? And in facing these, I decided, well, I'm just going to go all in. I'm going to let even those questions fall away. I don't know the answers to those questions. To really just not know. Like things got really exciting then. And I was like, I don't know where I'm going, what I'm doing, where I live, who I am. And I was in the middle of nowhere, Arizona, when that shift kind of started to happen. And I realized, oh, I live here now. I live wherever this bus is. This is my home, wherever it is. Stepping out of the regular ways of living, all the scripts, all the roles. They were pretty strong for me in particular, but I imagine they're probably pretty strong for a lot of us, all the things that we think we're supposed to do and be. It was pretty terrifying. Some of you know that first week was actually a little challenging. I had a breakdown early on and I ended up in a hotel while I was getting repaired. And so after that first week of getting some repairs done and then finally in Arizona, at that point, it was time. It was time to step off the grid, to find a place where I would just park and enter into the pilgrimage really wholeheartedly. I actually had to work up my courage to do that. I kind of had to talk myself into it, though. Over time, I became more comfortable, but initially it was just terrifying. And so I thought I would read a journal entry from that first night. It's actually the night before. Here we go. So this is a writing on being afraid. And looking at the weather and places we could go after Wilcox, I notice I'm fearful of taking the plunge, of staying in the bus somewhere that I'm not tethered to, a place that I don't know. What if the cats are distressed? What if it's too cold? What if it's too windy? What about the coyotes? It feels really scary all of a sudden. Somehow more so than if I was backpacking. Do I feel more exposed? Even though the bus is shelter, it is more visible and more vulnerable in a way. What if I get stuck? All of these fears have fixes. If it doesn't feel okay, I can always go somewhere else. Nothing is fixed. I don't have to do anything that doesn't feel okay. Next entry, being brave, being afraid and doing it anyway. Just go. Find one of these places, and if it feels good, stay there and see how it goes. If it doesn't feel good, leave. Go find somewhere else. You're going to be okay. You are okay, and so are the cats. We are learning and growing together. We can do this. Deep breath. Love will show you the way. This is the entry from the next day. So this is December 8th in Eloy, Arizona, north of Tucson. Being brave continued. We did it. Continuing to be persistent. I got the bus, looked at this morning, and we found our spot. We're here. I can't keep staying in hotels. Screw it. First night in the bus, we made it. Whew. That was how things started. And despite that initial fear and discomfort, not knowing has been very exciting. It's felt really alive, very vital from the very beginning, even in that fear. And I found there's tremendous freedom and joy in really not knowing, being fully present and open to whatever is happening. At one point, I had Dokusan from the road and a sensei, and I said, I think I'm losing the plot. And I was so happy to be losing that plot. Charlotte Joko Beck said, I read this just the other week, joy is just what's going on, minus our opinion about it. It means that life and me were the same thing. It's just what's happening. So my cats have been the greatest teachers in this. They've been rewilding me, and we've become really intimate. We poop and pee together. Thomas covers up my poop. I cover up his. We're one animal at this point. I'll be sharing some photos and videos so you'll see that. They are really, really good at not knowing. And I'm so grateful for their resiliency and companionship. They've been on their own pilgrimage as well, though, to really be and live their fullest life. So I have some poems I wrote along the way, and so I'll share those as I go. This one is called Being Ignorant, from March 3rd. I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. I pretend otherwise all the time. Who is it that is pretending? Grasping at everything? I don't know anything. So you might wonder at this point, well, how do you know where to go if you don't know? And what will you do if you don't know what you're going to do? So I've come to rely on a couple of practices for this. Number one, move with what moves you. Number two, go where you're called. So move with what moves you. Could be the heat, could be the cold, could be the rain, the weather in various forms. Could also be beauty. I was called to, I'd heard there was this labyrinth in the middle of the desert. I want to go see that. I felt moved by that, so I moved. This is how I moved. Could be humor. I heard about this place called Dog Canyon, and I thought it would be really funny to take the cats to Dog Canyon. Could be curiosity. Could be love. It could be longing. What moves you? That's what has been moving me. I would just feel, what do I feel moved by? And then I would go do that thing. Once I got there, more was revealed. Like, oh, this is why I came here. Yeah, it was funny to go to Dog Canyon, but it turned out to be this incredible experience, meeting some other people there and being in community. It turned out that Dog Canyon was a deep and rich home for the Apache people, and the mountains there are sacred for them. I didn't know anything about Dog Canyon until I went. So there would always be something else that would be revealed. The labyrinth as well took me to my favorite place, which is, some of you heard of me talk about Kofa Wildlife Refuge in Arizona. And I ended up going back to visit that multiple times. So move with what moves you. Number two, go where you're called. It's why I'm here. I was called to officiate at a wedding for two former students of mine on Saturday. And I thought, oh, what a great reason to get to Boulder too. I get to see everybody. So I felt called to service in that way. I also, when I was in New Mexico this spring, my nephew said he and his mother were going to be at the Grand Canyon. And I didn't have plans to go to the Grand Canyon. It really wasn't something on my radar. I haven't seen my nephew in years. It's rare that we're anywhere close to each other. He lives in North Carolina. I wasn't planning on going that way. And he said, I would really love to see you. So I went to the Grand Canyon and we spent a couple days together. And as that was happening, I had a friend who's a nomad, but who's disabled and needs some support, reach out and say, hey, is anybody out there? She reached out to a few friends that might be able to come park with me for a little bit. She gave her coordinates. It was 2 hours from the Grand Canyon. Like, oh, well, now I know even more why I made the trek all the way to the Grand Canyon. So I went 2 more hours further west after Refuge there. And I parked with her for 5 weeks and supported her. So go where you're called. And in not knowing, not pre-planning, I thought I was going to Taos. I loved Taos. And I thought, oh yeah, it's getting hot. I'm gonna head up north. No, I ended up going to the Grand Canyon. Each step reveals the next. That's a big piece of how I've been living. I will say, in case you're wondering though, it sounds really like, oh, wonderful. It hasn't been easy all the time, right? I have this idea of meeting everyone and everything openly from a place of not knowing. And again, then there's the reality of it. My fears, resistances, and judgments have come up the whole time. There have been days where I have been back in my scripts, right? With nothing else to distract me, no roles that I could escape from those feelings from. If anything, they were louder than ever. And I had to really face them. I didn't have any choices, just me and the cats. There's only so many times I can tell them what's going on. So I really started to look at those fears, those judgments, the frequency of them. I didn't like what I saw, but there was no escaping it. And then I had an insight when I was in Texas, and it was really active due to some circumstances there. I was very agitated. And then it occurred to me, well, if my practice is to meet everyone and everything with an open heart, that has to include me. So this is my third practice, to try to really fully realize wherever I go, there I am. And what that means is, yeah, all my stuff is right there with me. And can I accept that in the same way that I would accept whatever it is in my cats or in another human being? Can I really accept that? So I have another reading that I'll share with you all on that end of things. So this is in Texas. There's actually a visual to this. This is how I was feeling at the time. You all can see that. So that was how I was feeling at the time. And I wrote, being agitated, being annoyed, being irritable, being impatient, being inflexible, being self-aggressive, being resistant, being rebellious, being contracted, being rageful, being resentful, being unsettled, being overstimulated, probably the cause of a lot of that other stuff. Being intolerable, being aggravated, being irascible. This was all what was happening. This was just what was happening. And then I'll share from a few months later when I was with my friend. Some of you know her and she shared publicly about this. So Moonbeam, if y'all remember. So I parked with her for 5 weeks. And there was a point where I was kind of a jerk. So I wrote about being a jerk. Humbled yet again, who am I to say how anyone should be, what anyone should do? Where's my heart? How often am I living in my head rather than here? It's also been 8 weeks with no writing, no poetry, no art, little meditation. No wonder I've been feeling cold, numb, hard, nothing. Home is where the heart is. It's time to come home. And then shortly after that, I wrote being sad. I miss what? Being held, cared for, loved, supported. Wandering about, here I am, over and over and over again. A big part of my pilgrimage has been continuing to practice accepting myself just as I am. Being anxious, being afraid, being wild, being tender, being masculine, being feminine, being quiet, being sensitive, being me. So how is this a refuge? Talk about the refuge of the road. Those of you who've done the precepts class or worked with the Heart of Being, the book, John Dutto, Lori Roshi spoke of refuge as complete trust, a trust devoid of safety nets. The Japanese word for taking refuge comes from the term ki-e, ki meaning to unreservedly throw oneself into, and e is to rely upon. And apparently the image he would often use, you might have heard this, is of a child just throwing themselves unreservedly into their parents' arms, completely trusting that they would catch them. I never had that feeling with my parents. I never felt at home or like I had a refuge. And there's so many ways that I was conditioned to protect myself from that reality, to separate myself, and then I resisted being just me. Maizumi Roshi said that the practice is about closing the gap between yourself and yourself, to have good trust in yourself, not in the one you think you should be, but in the one that you are. All of it, not just parts of it, all of it. Who is that one? So our practice is to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. To take refuge in the Buddha, we become one with it. Being one with the Buddha, to take refuge in the Dharma, we become one with it. To take refuge in the Sangha, we become one with it. Okay, sounds good. How do I do that? How do I actually do that? I printed and posted it in the bus, the Bodhisattva vows, and also the shorter version of the 3 refuges from our Gatha of Atonement. For those of you who are new to that, we often think of it as at-one-ment, a way of making things whole. And so I would see them every day, and they became a really core practice. So the 3 refuges in this version says, may love dissolve my fear. May trust dissolve my need to control. May connectedness dissolve my alienation. The only way that I've been able to continuously step into this unknown every day and develop more intimacy and vulnerability is through this practice: love, trust, and connection. Noticing if I feel afraid. This dude pulled up in the middle of the night to park right next to where I was parked, set up a tent right outside my bus. He's really wild, might be on something, I don't know. Again, those are kind of my people from recovery, but still it was a little like, ooh, I should probably move over. And then the next morning he was hiking on the trail. May love dissolve my fear. I said, hello. Montezuma and I are now fast friends. He's a wild one. And he texts me and says, why do people have a hard time hanging out with me? Am I that unlikable? And I said, well, you are very alive, and not everybody's okay with that. Some people are really afraid of that. I kind of think it's awesome, but maybe that's it. Maybe it's not so much about you. A few days go by and he texts me back. He goes, maybe it's just because I'm so pretty. So we're buds now because I let love dissolve my fears. Right? Noticing if I feel the need to control, I open into trust. Noticing if I'm feeling avoidant or the need to protect myself, I open into connection. it was really hard and still is. I saw someone earlier today and I saw all my anxieties come up. It happens around this particular person. And it's like, what is that? What is that? But the pilgrimage plunged me right into the heart of it. A friend asked me how it was being in so much solitude out there. And I'll read you just a short bit that I wrote to her. It doesn't feel like solitude at all. Instead, I have found deep belonging. In some places, there are other human nomads, and we develop connections both verbally and non-verbally through the simple rhythms of everyday life and relationship, which is ever present no matter where I am. When I go to use the campground bathroom, Sharon is there making her coffee over her handmade fire pit. And Dave and Leon, old road buddies, are sitting in their respective chairs, pulled up in between their campers, swapping stories. The British couple from Canada, Steve and Julie, are there drying their sleeping bags on the picnic table as they do every morning after they walk the dog, Nick. And we negotiate interaction and privacy in our communal lives gently and respectfully, welcoming and opening up to each other to the degree that each feels called and its trust is developed. There's a palpable community of care here of kind souls from all walks of life who can be called upon for help or support or connection if needed. And I'm reminded of the line from the song, "It's a Wonderful World." I see friends shaking hands saying, "How do you do?" They're really saying, "I love you." One thing I've learned, though, is that so far, everyone traveling in this way has gone through something painful and deep in their lives that led them to living otherwise, myself included. And sometimes it's by choice, other times it's by necessity, but there are communities of care everywhere. And I think of those displaced in Ukraine right now and in Valley. And that it's the communities of care in that we hold each other, that we are a refuge for each other. So someone recently, again, asked me if there was a theme for my pilgrimage, and I shared that the theme was no theme. But I also had to let go of that. That was also an idea. I had to let go of letting go. I saw how I was subtly trying to improve myself with my letting go practice. Good sentence, student. Could I let go of that too? No more striving, nowhere to get to, nothing to do. In the Heart Sutra, we chant, no wisdom and no gain, no gain. And thus the Bodhisattva lives prajna paramita with no hindrance in the mind, no hindrance, therefore no fear. Far beyond deluded thoughts, this is nirvana. What is the this in this is nirvana? This home of no home is vast and intimate. From February 26th, the sand reveals itself as sand, the rock, the wind, the glitter on the salton sea. There are no secrets here, living in reality. From March 17th, dear sacred mountain, your body, my body, your being, my bones, unwavering, unafraid, alive, patient, perfect. Miko, my cat, his tail softly wafting as he watches the sunset every night, bumping his head or nose to mine briefly, placing a paw on Thomas's arm or mine as he reassures himself or us of our connection. Thomas, my other cat, scheming in his eyes and longing in his body as he plots yet again how he might escape up to the deck on the bus roof, and who has learned to go around when he is on a lead and we come to a place in the trail where he can fit through, but I can't. who comes running immediately to see what is the matter if Miko lets out a cry. The tiny, tiny grains of sand and dirt that stir with my breath an inch below my nose as I lower myself to the ground in yoga, that cast miniature shadows 10 times their length in the late afternoon. The tea kettle and its insistent whistle, the gentle rocking of the bus in the wind, the taste of creosote and sage or sulfur in the air from the sea on my tongue. The rail cars that pass every hour with their rumbling, their shipping containers trundling by, orange, white, blue, green, and black against the desert beige. The rocks everywhere, each one original, unique, not like any other. I feel I'm friends with everyone and I want to know them personally, intimately. I feel the same about people now too. I want to know you personally, intimately, and I want you to know me too. And it is still hard to say that. I'm still learning how to be in relationship and still letting go of my avoidant and anxious ways. And so on the day I left Boulder, I received the greatest teaching in this. We have a little leadership meeting in the mornings after Zazen with the senior students and with Sensei. And it was the day I'm leaving. And so I joined in Zazen, bus was all ready. As many of you know, it was hard getting out of town. I was ready like months before and it was time, but I wanted to see everybody off and we were doing that and we had this meeting and went through everything. And then at the end, Showan said, oh, one more thing. And I just let out, I'm like, I have to go. And the one more thing, I'm definitely gonna cry when I say this. The one more thing was a haiku he wrote about how much he was gonna miss me. Oh, and it was beautiful. And it just broke my heart that I was like so ready to get out of there that I was dismissive of that. And I hadn't mentioned it to anybody since then, but it stayed with me this whole time. The whole drive that first day, that's all I could think about and feel. So in the 8 months, I have written 2 haikus in response, and I'll share them tonight. Sean's not here tonight, but if he was, he would probably read this for me, so I'll read it for him. So this is his haiku on December 1st. Miss you, this cold house. Incense lights my wooden floor. Silent, snowing tears. So I wrote one on January 4th, Miss You Too is the title. Where did it come from? This lonely tear on my cheek. It must be the wind. And then I wrote another one. I had the first 2 lines the whole time, and I didn't find the final line until I was driving to Boulder last week, and it came to me. For Showan, eager to depart, I almost missed it. Your love calling me back home. This home of no home is vast and intimate. Kyoto reminded me the other day of the lines from Song of Zazen. With form that is no form, going and coming, we never leave home. I used to make my life as small as I could in order to feel okay and grounded. I felt I had no home. And in this home of no home, home is everything, rising everywhere all the time. One more poem. This is in the Kofa, January 3rd. Morning sun drapes hazily across the rugged mountain. Soft breeze gently whispers. The rocks announce their stillness with shadows resting patient on the desert floor. Day in and day out, the cactus stand watch, receiving the warmth of the golden glow with open arms, letting come, letting go, the wind, the rain, the darkness, the snow. So I still don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what the point of this is. I currently have no idea when I'm actually going to leave Boulder or what direction I'm going in, but it will come. What I do know is that my experience of myself and life has expanded. It's felt like just one continuous session. So that expansion from 1 week, multiply that times 8 months. It's been really quite interesting. One experience that was my first clue that this was happening was I was with my friend of Moonbeam, who we were kind of scouting places, and we had driven up the mountain a little bit, and we need to come back down. But we got caught in this conversation, and then I said to him, "Oh, why don't we go back downstairs and we can finish our conversation there?" And downstairs was down the mountain. Like my home had become the whole, like there wasn't an inside and outside anymore. It's like, yeah, let's go downstairs. So that it kind of caught my attention. And then the white elephant itself is expanding too. So it has served in so many ways. It now has a name from a young girl that I spent some time with, Josephina, dubbed it Sam's Mobile Cat Cafe / Medical Clinic / Meditation Hut, Art Studio, and Cat Cooling Station. So its identity has also expanded vastly. I do see how this pilgrimage has changed me and the people I've met, and how love, trust, and connection has served us all along the way. I was talking with Jitsujo and I saw her in CCLA about the ministry of presence. And I will say, if the lives of wandering monks of the past, like Ryokan and Basho, can inspire me hundreds of years later to more fully realize oneness and interconnectedness of all life, then perhaps my travels will also inspire others, though I am a little more modest in the scope that I may have. And one final poem, March 5th. I vow to save all sentient beings. How do I save them? By seeing them, by serving them, by receiving them, by being them.